Welcome back to another episode of The Short Show. It's been a minute since I've been on here, but I don't think I'm the most important person on here right now. The person to my, well, I guess to my right, yeah, I don't know, mirroring's hard. Um, I'm being joined by Ryan. Ryan, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy couple weeks within the USL from the Open Cup to just getting back into championship and League One action. So I'm excited to talk about it tonight. We had two games last night within the USL Championship that I thought were pretty interesting. We had a Richmond Charlotte one in League One from Monday. So certainly a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I guess let's do a little bit of chronological order. Um, Listen. Richmond deserved to win that match. Basically, I was a little bit shocked that Charlotte put up the fight that they did, just to be honest. But that red card in the 69th or 70th minute, I can't remember off the top of my head, um, definitely did them in a little bit. But I still think right now Richmond is still your class of the USL League One at the moment. Obviously, Sad Wolves and Union Omaha and Tormenta are quickly behind them because the season just started. But Richmond just looks to be a step above the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Richmond's just getting everything figured out. Terzaki had the opening goal from this match at the 6th minute. You then got Charlotte, who came back and equalized at 37 before Richmond eventually took the lead in the second half. But even then, like you said, Charlotte didn't play terribly. They put up a pretty decent fight with 19 shots, 7 of which were on target. But Richmond just were more clinical with their chances and took advantage of it. And yeah, they seem to be just kind of that top team to beat within the conference right now. If you're looking at my ELO ratings, they are my top pick at the moment, and it's proof that they're. I think we are very much. If you had to pick a top two teams right now, it would be Kickers and Wolves.
Yeah, and obviously you can maybe look at the standings and be like, well, obviously that's it. But I mean, points are one thing, but watching these teams and seeing how they're playing, I mean, they just look like the better teams as well. Sometimes, and this is something that I think, our good friend John Morrissey, obviously he breaks down numbers like crazy. We all do the bit of the soccer nerd thing where we look at all the numbers, but I mean, one thing that John has said before is that numbers are one thing, but film doesn't lie. And that's facts. And if you look at Richmond and Sad Wolves right now, the film does not lie. Those guys look good. But Tormenta catching stride right now. Unfortunately, they decided to do it against Legion, which screw you, Bolt.
Hey, and I had my faith misguided in picking a lock with them last week. If I had not picked Legion as my lock, if I had just picked someone else, I would have gained I would have had my best week ever for predictions. But uh, I guess my faith was not rewarded.
This is my old I told you so on Tuesday, and I was like, he's not here to defend himself, and it's not even something that the fans saw. But I was like in our private like DM group chat, you put them as your lock, and I literally just said don't, and you're like, no, it's fine, I believe, and I was like, don't.
Well, I mean, that is a decent segue because if you get rid of the Tormenta result, and still, first off, props to Tormenta for at least starting to figure it out. I know it's been kind of a tumultuous first couple of seasons within USL 1, but I do think the team is getting better and they're starting to figure things out. If you're looking at their expected points from American Soccer Analysis, they have the second highest expected points within the league. That is just 0.01 behind Richmond's expected points at the moment, which is still a certainly impressive start. I think Tormenta is doing well and just they need more time. Obviously, it's still tough to kind of gauge within USL 1. I think uh, the one of the USL 1 pods, they had their like rankings, and I still think it's like very early. We've only played 4 games at your highest level, and Northern Colorado has played 2. So this is like I still don't trust my ratings as much, but it's looking encouraging for those teams like Richmond for Tormenta.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, if you look at Torments, I mean, the game against North Carolina, they weren't good enough. I think they were a little hard done by losing that match. But I mean, they go into Union Omaha, get a draw, and it was on a red card that Phelps got that was complete BS. That was rescinded in like 2 days. And I know that doesn't give you back points, but it felt like one of those matches that if they had, that extra man that they were going to get all three. And I feel like we'd be having a very different conversation about Tormenta right now.
Yeah, and by all accounts, they still have enough going forward with them. They picked up a very big win over Greenville, a Triumph team who is certainly struggling to start their year kind of a slow start. But then they have games against Tucson and a crucial one against Charlotte that I think will really set the tone. If they can get out of both of those games with at least 4 points, I think you could start looking at Tormenta and kind of pencil them in to being a top half team within this league.
For sure. And I want to move away from this match a little bit, but there's a lot of exciting matches that happened yesterday as well. And one of the teams, basically, it was the Tormenta loser derby, which was Charleston versus Birmingham, both two teams that got smashed by Tormenta in the Open Cup because that's the magic of the cup, baby. And Legion get back to winning ways. This is now 2 wins in a row for the Legion. But I think for Legion fans, this is only the third win of the season, and this was the first win of the season that Legion fans could look at and say, hey, we dominated this match. Like, we deserve to win. I mean, Loudon, it was like, we're doing great, and then they let in a kickoff goal down a man. And then it's Hartford, and it takes a header off of a corner from a man who is 5'6" to score the game winner in extra time or in added time. Those didn't feel like convincing wins, but this one felt different. I think a lot of Legion fans left the stadium feeling very happy with it. But I think on the flip side, Charleston probably feels a little hard done because if you just look at the numbers, purely the numbers, they were arguably better in some respect than Legions. I mean, I know their XG was higher, which is not everything, but it's still something. I don't know. This was a weird one. And obviously, as a fan of the Legion, I'm walking away confident as crap. But if I'm a Charleston fan, I wonder how I'd be feeling right now.
And you should be confident as a Legion fan. You had mentioned this being your third win of the year, but it's also your third win in 4 games. And it's brought Birmingham, after a very slow start to the season, back into a playoff spot after 8 games played. And they're currently only 4 points off of third place, 3 points off of third place at the moment. And so I know you had your gripes at the start of the year, and it was almost kind of talk of, is the hot seat warming there? But I still feel like this is one of those, especially within USL, you got to let teams and breathe a little, like give them their time and don't make any really rash judgments. I know we've already seen in MLS, we've seen firings within DC United and Real Salt Lake, but I still feel like with USL, this is one of those, if you're going to have so much roster turnover on teams for just almost like half your roster leaving, you got to give them time to gel and like talk to me in June if you're going to ask about firing a coach then. And because then you would have played about 13, 14 games, and then that would be like an appropriate time.
I think for a lot of Legion fans, a lot of the frustration, obviously the goal scoring was not up to par because, well, it's hard to replace Nico Brett no matter who you bring in. That's just the facts. But other than Nico Brett, Legion quite literally didn't lose anybody. I think there was a lot of continuity from last year to this year, and it felt like it's like why are we letting in goals? We were one of the best defensive teams last year. What's going on? What did I guess it's one of those situations that fans were thinking, did our attackers who were not involved with the defense at all really have that much influence on the backline chemistry? And I think as the year has gone on, the answer is kind of yeah. I think you see our wingers, even though they're more attacking, are still very they still get back a lot and still help a lot defensively. So some definitely interesting. But some stuff to look at to me is Charleston here. Faro, I don't know why he got the start over Kuzminski. I didn't see him being injured. That was an interesting decision. Don't get me wrong. Faro had 2 phenomenal saves in the second half, but that felt like a weird move with this for Charleston and Charleston's eyes being a very winnable match.
This was something that Charleston probably could have taken something from the result. As we had mentioned at the start, that they've won the XG, but also I think Charleston this year has just been very unlucky with a lot of their results. If you're looking back through some of their XG games, there were some that they definitely should have gotten a result out of. Their one win over Tulsa at the start of the year was a game they lost the XG on. But then since then, they've had games that they should have at least gotten a point out of. And I think a lot of it has been a little bit of being unlucky, but in USO, a league that's so heavily built on your form and what have you done lately that kind of carries on the momentum, I'd be getting kind of nervous if I was a Battery supporter at the moment, and that you're currently in the bottom 4 teams of the conference and there's no wins in your last 5.
And this sounds harsh, and I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it, maybe. But the team that Charleston beat, like you mentioned, I mean, Tulsa was a little hard done to not get any kind of points out of. And that was kind of before Tulsa really hit their stride. The Tulsa team that came out the next week and the week after was a very different team than what we saw in week 1. If you're Tulsa, you're sitting there saying our first win came against Tulsa, who's good now, but when we beat them, they definitely weren't. So I don't know how to feel if I'm a Charleston fan. And this is another one of those situations. And this kind of goes back to your point earlier about talking about firing coaches. I mean, they got rid of their longtime coach. And granted, we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but when it comes to results, that has not worked out.
To be fair, they did get a rather, I guess, baffling 1-1 draw with current league leaders Louisville at the moment. And so there are, I don't want to like give up or like say that the season is a loss for them. Results do need to turn around as it stands at the moment. They are 7 points out of a playoff spot, and wins need to start coming from somewhere. But I still feel like there are just some results that are just somewhat unlucky need to have it end up being the way that they are. If you're looking ahead to some of their games moving forward, I mean, they have a Memphis, New Mexico, Miami, and Loudoun. That's 3 more really tough fixtures ahead. And then maybe Loudoun as like the next one that you could possibly pick up a result from.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Memphis team. I mean, listen, that Memphis match yesterday, from the very first minute, fireworks, and then Lewis Hilton decide to, I don't know. That was a wonder goal that he had from the free kick. Honestly, I'm a little bit mad that he scored it just for the pure fact of I thought Prosper Kasim would have won goal of the week this week if Lewis Hilton just did not exist. And that free kick was nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic game from Memphis. There was the controversial red card call from Tampa Bay in the second half, and then Memphis got the kind of icing on the cake goal to go up 3-1 to close it out. But after losing just their first game of the season to Pittsburgh 3-0, they've seemed to have figured it out, and they've notched really impressive wins over as it turns out, a decent enough Las Vegas team. They get a 1-1 draw with Detroit, a 2-1 win with Colorado Springs. I think you're looking at a conversation that we should be having is Memphis being a solid enough playoff team in this season. I know we were all like relatively high on them entering the year, but I think they've like made their case. They belong in the top half of the conference.
I said it preseason, and I guess you could say I have the receipts, even though it hurts like crap to say. I had Memphis making the playoffs quite comfortably. And I had a lot of people saying, well, we don't know what they have yet. We don't know what they have yet. And I was like, listen, my biggest stance on it was they have players that they got from League One that are legit. And that everybody's seeing this year thanks to the magic of the cup. League One is not far off from the championship. And the top of League One is, I would argue, better than the bottom of the championship. You can make whatever pro rel comments you want about that. We can argue about that all day long. It's not happening, no matter how much I, lowly podcast host for the USL, may complain about it. But I think whenever people start calling up these League One players, instead of saying, well, they're signing these League One players, they're not trying this year, this is not their year, maybe look at them and be like, yo, why are they signing those guys? Because they've had some success.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that there are more than one way to try and build a team, and I do believe it's worthwhile looking into USL 1 to try and pick up a lot of those players to bring into the championship level. Even that we've seen from Detroit, they've had a mixture of bringing over some of their NISA players as well as basically assembling a squad that has been proven to be one of the more competitive teams within the Eastern Conference. But if you're looking ahead to Memphis's next 4 games, you get Miami, Charleston, Indy 11, and Los Stones. I mean, out of those 4 games, you could easily see this Memphis team in getting 9 points minimum.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think if Memphis is going to make their playoff case and they are going to say we belong, I think they need to get at least 9 points here. And this is kind of my rule of thumb for the USL and baseball as well, actually. I mean, soccer and baseball are 2 of the longer sports, obviously not as long as basketball, but they, at least in America, they've run some more timelines as well. And to me, it's if you are not in a playoff spot by the time, like the summer break comes around, whenever, the kindergartners are getting out of class and the high schoolers are going down to the beach or whatever. If you're not in a playoff spot by then, you are going to have to fight and claw to get back because it's no longer early in the season. You are in the thick of it and you need to get back.
Yeah, and I feel like within USL in particular, you need to be basically in your playoff spot by July 31st. If you have to start relying on second half points, it's almost too late to make a push. I recall, I think it was 2016, FC Montreal had a horrible first start to the year, but then they closed out the end of their season, I think on like 5 wins out of their last 10 games, which was enough to claw them out of the bottom of the league. But that first half of the year really did them in on their season.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're going to be looking at coming up this year, especially. I mean, we've kind of mentioned them a little bit, and I would like to mention the fact that the whole waiting until the end of summer break or the beginning of summer break kind of applies to League One as well. They have a little bit of a shortened season, so I would say that the same applies there. But, I mean, I don't know. You look at guys like Hartford who have 1 point from 6, Baby Bulls who we weren't expecting to be good anyway. And the shocking ones of being the Battery. You see those guys. Then you look over at El Paso, Monterey Bay, the defending champions, Orange County. Those guys being the bottom 3 of the USL. If we get, at least in my eyes, to the beginning of June and they are still bottom 3, I think they need to be having a real long, hard conversation with themselves saying, is this the direction we want to go? Start looking at coaching, start looking at players. I'm not saying fire them, but you need to start having some motivation conversations or finding ways to get better pieces in, because at that point it might be too far gone.
I think what is helpful within this league setup so far is the Western Conference still seems relatively bunched together. You're not seeing a gap starting to form between the haves and the have-nots, such as what you are witnessing in the Eastern Conference right now. Like if you're comparing just kind of a division of players, there's a gap of 5th place. The Tampa Bay Rowdies has 13 points to FC Tulsa on 9 points. A similar gap with that with it in the Western Conference has RGV on 9 points, dropping all the way down to El Paso on 4 points, which is still, there's a lot of movement that still is left to be had within the Western Conference, I believe. And if I had to bet, there's a team currently right now outside the Western Conference playoff picture that will find their way into a playoff spot by the time we get to the end of the year.
Kind of talking about the tops of these leagues. There is a very exciting match, and we didn't have a chance to do this week's predictions. We kind of took a bye week this week, but I mean, I think everybody on the planet should be circling Lou City versus Pittsburgh and the Rowdies versus the Loyal. Those are going to be two electric matches, especially this Pitt versus Lou City match. I mean, that is a rivalry that has gone on for years now. There's always some kind of sparks that fly in that one. Both teams are ridiculously good. They always are, and it seems like they always will be, especially if Lou City does their dang thing and Bob Willie's still breathing. Those teams are going to be doing it. And I would love to see how the Loyal travel. I mean, Al Lang is a nightmare to play at for a multitude of reasons. I think the Loyal are legit. I think they could end up making a solid run at the USL Cup. Let's see what they can do. Can they do it on a Saturday night in humid Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I think we're looking at 4 teams that we had just mentioned who could very well be making the conference semifinals of their respective playoffs. And the winner of the Louisville-Pittsburgh match, I think, will basically set the pace for winning the Eastern Conference moving forward. And at this moment, I still feel like that's something that Louisville kind of has the control over. They're the last unbeaten team within USL Championship at the moment. I think all of us were betting on Colorado Springs being that last one, but yeah, I see Louisville just kind of controlling that pace, and if they can take a 5-point lead atop the Eastern Conference, that's going to be very tough to wrestle away from them, especially if you have to go 7 points back to where Detroit is pending the results of their game that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interesting movement to be had. And this is another thing to pay attention to on where I'm trying to find it now. Colorado Springs taking on an Oakland Roots team who has shown some life recently versus you have San Antonio taking on Monterey Bay, who they got one win against said Oakland Roots and have just, in the wise words of every Southern person, bless their hearts. I think this may be the week that we see San Antonio submit themselves at the top of the table. Granted, both teams could pull out a win and it stays tied or however tiebreakers work in the USL because I feel like it changes every other year. But this may be it. This may be the time that we see a little bit of a change.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup with that Oakland Colorado Springs one, especially since the Roots are oddly one of the 4 teams right now who have been unbeaten in their last 5 games. Now, granted, that's 4 draws and 1 win in that time, so it's there's still work to be done. But Oakland is the only team, is one of 2 teams currently in the Eastern Conference outside of the playoff picture that doesn't have a negative goal differential. So they're starting to find their form, and I think it is improving their team moving forward. But having to play Colorado Springs is a tough task. But I think you are right that San Antonio going up against Monterey Bay this weekend is going to help submit San Antonio's spot atop the Western Conference moving forward. And hey, who knows? Maybe 538 had something in their mind to start the year.
I hate this. I'm sorry, Harry, if you're watching this, but there's nothing I want more than 538 to be wrong, and it has nothing to do with San Antonio. I just don't want them to be right. It's fine. You're kind of talking about teams getting themselves right and submitting themselves towards the top of the table. Tomorrow we have a pretty big matchup in League One, and it is Greenville versus the Sad Wolves. Greenville, who is at the bottom of the league right now, versus Chattanooga Red Wolves, who are at the top. I think a lot of times you'd look at stuff on paper and say it was the bottom of the league versus the top of the league, write it off. But this is the Greenville Triumph. They pushed your Charlotte FC to the absolute brink. They are a quality team versus the Sad Wolves that they've been really good, but can they go away from home at a rowdy Legacy? We'll see. I don't know.
I think what's really tough within USL One, and we spoke a little bit about this, is just still how early this is. That I don't want any team to be finding their panic button quite yet. That should be locked in a desk drawer. It should not be on the desk at all. But like, look at it this way with the Triumph. If they win this game, they could climb as high as fourth if results go their way. It's a very wide open USL League One at the moment. And I don't want any team to think we don't have a win our first 3 games, we should be panicking. I think Greenville will inevitably be fine. You just need to get that one victory. You're just trying to start turning around games. So I think it'll be a very tough matchup. I think Chattanooga has certainly been one of the better teams this year, as they have been throughout their first 4 games. So I think it will be a very fascinating game to watch for tomorrow, but I don't want any team to start panicking because they're not in the correct spot at the table at this time, nor do I want any team who are there currently to start resting on their laurels. It's still a very early season, and USL League One seems to be pretty competitive top to bottom this year.
The last match I really want to discuss is going to be Forward Madison versus El Fuego. I mean, Fuego has come out and just I don't think anybody could have seen what the Fuego have done. We all thought they were going to be good because their lineup is good, but Jesus Christ. On the other hand, you have Ford Madison, who they're unbeaten, but they're all draws. So it looks like they're doing worse than they are, but I don't know. It's just one of those things where they draw against the Sad Wolves. They draw against Union Omaha. 2 pretty good results in a vacuum. And then you look at FC Tucson, which is starting to look like a bit of a bad result drawing there. But this is going to be an interesting matchup to see, does Forward Madison finally do something besides draw? And is Fuego as good as we think they are?
Yeah, Forward Madison certainly taking the AFC Richmond approach to the start of their season. If ever, not to have spoilers, but it does work out for the aforementioned Richmond team, or AFC Richmond, that is.
Very different.
In their show. But yeah, I think it's interesting. If you're looking at some of the XG right now from American soccer, or Forward Madison is underperforming right now. So they at some point they have to get a result to kind of like go forward and kind of improve upon things. And honestly, Fuego's also underperforming a little bit at their XG as well. So I think this will be a very interesting matchup. As we've discussed, Fuego has certainly made waves within USL League One for their roster moves going into the start of this year. So I think a lot of this will learn from both of these teams. And honestly, even a Fuego win could find them a top League One at the moment.
I mean, so basically this match could end up being one or 2 ways. Both teams explode and we see one of the matches of the year, or it ends up being one of the most boring matches you ever watched in your life. This basically feels like whenever I'm getting on FM and I have this wonderful clash where it's 1 versus 2 and I'm so excited and I want to hype it up. Like I'm hyping myself up and I'm like, let's do this. It's going to be an absolute belter. And then like, great, a 0-0 draw or a 1-1 draw, both goals coming in the first 5 minutes and then nothing happens.
That's FM for you. You get those really hype games. I always try and do the FM tradition of wearing a suit and tie for those cup finals that I play in and celebrating with those. Haven't had one of those yet on this edition of FM, but I'm certainly getting there. Although I will say my Venice Europa League champions from FM 21 was probably my greatest achievement. And then losing on penalties in the UEFA Super Cup to PSG for some reason.
I mean, it's PSG. That doesn't count. It was basically a win.
We led that match for, I'd say, 60 minutes of it. 5 at the back does work well, even though I hate the system so much.
People wouldn't park the bus if it didn't work, I guess. I mean, that's how Roy Hodgson made a managerial career for about 50 years.
That's
I
how
love
future Everton manager Sean Dyche's going to do to get them promoted from the Championship.
Somewhere Phil is watching this, just celebrating.
But one last match I at least wanted to quickly touch base on is the Charlotte Union Omaha. Those are two currently playoff teams within the USL Championship. And even after a slow start that we kind of begrudgingly said for Union Omaha, they still have 5 points out of their first 3 games and are currently third in League One. I still feel like maybe we wrote them off a bit too early. And as we've seen from previous Charlotte Independence games, that they've been prone to always have that kind of chaotic game, if you will, whether they have a 3-3 draw at the start of the year or they play a really tough game against Richmond. I feel like this is going to be one that if you really want to have like an interesting matchup between two teams, this is going to be your game to watch this weekend for League One.
For sure. I could not agree more. The last thing I want to mention is that this weekend, League Two kicks off. If you have a League Two team around you, go check them out. Some of the most fun I've had has been at League Two matches. I'm going to try to travel around a little bit this year and get some videos of League Two. But if you want to check out some of those, I mean, how many was it? I think it's like 5 of the U.S. men's national team players came through League Two. So if you want to see the future of not only just U.S. soccer, but U.S. men's national team, go check out League Two because there are some players down there.
Yeah, I mean, you're including a North Carolina Fusion U23 team that took a Richmond team very well. So they're within the South Atlantic. Asheville City, I've had good times when I've gone to games for there. There's just like a really bunch of great teams that you can find within USL League One. I know within our Discord channel, we have a Christos FC fan, so we certainly have to give a shout out to them as well.
Hey,
but
they just had a kit drop today, and it is good stuff. I mean, it is good.
Yeah. And you get another Des Moines Menace in there, Minneapolis City. There are a bunch of really strong and really great USL League Two teams there. So if there's a team nearby, definitely go out, support them, and just you'll really enjoy your time at a lot of these games.
For sure. Well, thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We will be back on Monday with another episode of The Short Show, and then back to our normal programming. Again, thank you to Betsy Howe for joining us on Tuesday. That was a great time. Go listen to that episode if you haven't. But yeah, thank you guys. This has been Kaylor and Ryan, and thank you for watching this episode of The Short Show.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. This and every episode is brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network. Find podcasts and other written work at bgn.fm. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys again next week.